Hello again, everyone. I know it's been a long time since our very first video, over 3 months in fact, and a lot has happened since then, but we hope everyone out there watching and their families are safe, healthy, and happy. I know that a little explaining is in order since it was such a long time since our first video was published. It has to do with my computer, or lack thereof, or at least a computer good enough to edit and render the video files for YouTube. The one I was using and used to create the first video was my son's old gaming computer and was good enough to edit the video, but as hard as I tried, and I tried several different times to render the second video into an uploadable file, the computer just kept crashing before it could render the whole file. I finally just gave up because I was planning to have Marcus build me a new one anyway that could handle the high-end graphics that video editing demanded. I finally got around to ordering all the parts to build it, but was right at the beginning of the national lockdown due to the coronavirus, which caused all the parts to take much longer than normal to come in. With one part, the graphics card of all things, to take almost a month and a half to get here. I was just finally able to get the computer finished built the other day and get all the programs loaded on it to get started again. So I do apologize for the long delay between videos. So without further delay, here's the second video in the series. Hope you enjoy. Welcome to our second episode of Thoughts and History from a Centenarian with Dale Dyer. Today we'll be discussing Dale's teen years, the Great Dust Bowl, and the activities he was involved in high school. Pop? So, starting back from where we left off in our first interview, let's start with the Dust Bowl. When did that happen, and how did it affect y'all as a family in the plains of Kansas?
Well, the Dust Bowl was covered an awful lot of the United States, and it even the effects of it drifted clear back to this area in Georgia. The sky would be a sort of a brownish gray. It was cut out a lot of the light here, and you could really smell it. But anyway, it was probably in 1934, thereabout, that one of the Dust Bowl storms. We were in high school, and we were at that period of the day. I was in the study hall, which was one of the places where if you didn't have a class, you sat in the study hall and studied for your next lessons and so forth. And somebody hollered, "Hey, there's a big storm coming." We all looked out, and we looked to the west, and man, those clouds were just rolling, and it was just like a terrible storm. And then as it approached on, we began to realize that it was a dust storm that was blowing in from the west. And it just, when it hit us, even though we had all the lights on in the study hall, it was just a sort of a dim haze in the study hall, and we had pulled all the windows down, and yet that dust just seeped into the study hall, and it got on our books and everything, and you'd look at a light bulb, and you could just see the dust around in the air around a light bulb. And we all, if you had a handkerchief, we usually went to the fountain and wet the handkerchief, and then we tied it around our head, and where we breathed through the handkerchief, and where you're taking the breath, it just accumulated like mud on the outside that you'd normally been bringing into your lungs. It just a strange situation, and rather shocking to realize what a dust storm could be like that. Well, as I've mentioned before, that these dust storms out in the open, they drifted, and the wind come up from the south, and it would drift, and it covered fences, and covered machinery that's out in the field, or the cattle usually would turn their tails towards where they're coming from, and they'd usually get as far as a fence, and then they'd just hang their heads over the top wire of the fence. It's like they was at a feeding trough and so forth. It was a strange situation. The Dust Bowl happened several times. These dust storms come through. It did an awful lot of damage. It had gotten so dry that the soil was just more like flour. You press and your hand goes through it, and it was just so soft. It's such a strange thing. And in homes, even though you closed the doors and the windows, it just drifted into the houses and onto the bedding and everything in the house. People just didn't know really what to do about it except just suffer with it. It caused a lot of people to end up with pneumonia and so forth. Luckily, I don't remember that our family had definite effects from it, but it's something that if you haven't lived through something like that, you just couldn't believe what nature can do.
The reason that there was so much dust that got up in the air was because y'all have steady winds out there in Kansas, and y'all had farmed the soil to where it was just a fine powder, and of course with no moisture, no rain to soak down into the soil, it just dried out, and then those winds would take up and pull that dust, that dirt from the ground and pull it up into the air.
There was no ground growth of crops or grass or weeds, anything, because they died from the lack of water, and so it was just nothing but ground and dust.
And y'all didn't have hedgerows with trees or anything else that helped block all that wind from coming across there.
Well, this took place for such a period of time. They put out what they call windbreak out there. See, everything is square, a square mile, north, south, and east and west, and a square mile is 640 acres, and there's a road around every square mile if it doesn't have structure or something that's in the right-of-way. But these roads are open year-round, and it would fill up the ditches where the ditches didn't carry any water if it did rain, because they were just covered over with all this drifted dust and soil that blew. And these winds would be upwards of 40 miles an hour, and when you haven't got anything to stop it. So the government made a program of coming out, and on these mile stretches where it was just plumb open, they'd, on the north side of the road, they'd put out windbreaks, and they'd have about 4 or 5 or maybe 6 different types of trees that would more adapt to dry conditions, and they were still heavily leafed out normally. And some of those windbreak belts that was planted way back in the 30s are still, you can spot them out there. A lot of them have already been taken away, but a few of them are still available and evident of what was going on back at that time.
At the height of it, there would be winds, and a lot of them, I guess, primarily went from west to east, a lot of the winds, and it would pick up all that dust, and it would carry it literally across the United States. I've heard stories of where they would have dust clouds that would make it all the way to Washington, D.C.
That's right. Just an incident that happened. See, I started college in 34 and went to college to 38. In 38 I started college, and I started high school in 34 to 38, and then college 38 to 42. Mm-hmm. Well, when I was in college, and I took ROTC and also took flight training, and we went out to the airport one day to do some flying, and we got out there, and the wind was so strong from the south that our instructor wouldn't let us go flying. We stayed around there for a while, and finally the instructor turned to us and says, "Boys, I want to try something." We said, "Well, what do you got in mind?" He said, "I want you to open the door," and said, "I want two fellows on each wing and one fellow on my tail. I'm going to get in it and crank it up, and we're going to taxi out." It was just a grass field. "We're going to taxi out to the side of the building, out a couple hundred yards." And he says, "I'm going to face into the wind." And he says, "I'm going to rev my motor up like it's taking off. You hang on to me." And says, "When I shake my head," says, "you turn me loose." And he says, the wind was blowing over 40 miles an hour. And he says, "I'm going to see what happens." So we did exactly what he said, held him on the ground until we got in that position, and he revved up, and we let loose. He started moving, and he took off almost from a standstill base. The wind was blowing such that he could fly, but he flew just a little bit into the wind with all his power on, and he got up probably 500 feet, and he idled it back a little bit, and he went across the field backwards with that wind blowing him. And when he got to the end of the field, he revved it up, and he came back up even with us, and idled it down and come down, and we grabbed his wings, and we taxied him back into the hangar. I'd never seen a plane fly backwards before, but that's what happened. It was a small airplane, light. And
what kind of an airplane was it?
It was an Interstate Cadet. It was like a J-3 Cub type of a plane.
Was it an open cockpit, or was it?
No, it was a enclosed cockpit. But the pilot sat in the front and the student sat behind him.
Tandem.
Yeah, tandem. Yeah. So that goes along with the wind situation out there.
Getting back to the Dust Bowl, how many years did that last for?
Well, I don't know. It's you could say how long. Here, just back probably 20, 25 years ago or longer, when we were here, and we was over to Copper Hill Airport here one evening. I kept looking at the clouds to the west. I said, this looks odd. And I says, that reminds me of the dust storms out in Kansas. Mm-hmm. Well, the next day, it was in the newspaper that some of that dust from one of those storms that had just blew in out there had come all the way back here, and we were getting some of the atmospheric conditions from that dust storm.
And that dust storm was where?
It was in the Midwest, in Oklahoma, Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, basically. Mm-hmm. And it had got into the atmosphere, and it drifted back this far. And I think they did report it even in Washington, D.C., that they had some effects of it.
So you went to high school from 34 to 38. Any stories, anything you want to tell us about high school, your high school days?
In high school, I took French. I took it 1 year, and took typing in high school, and I took just general courses. And I didn't take many math courses like I should have. But anyway, while I was there, I sang in the high school chorus, and I started out as a high tenor. And before I ended in high school, I was a baritone. My voice changed while I was in high school. But I sang in the quartet with 3 other fellas, and we went to a singing convention down in Oklahoma, at Norman, Oklahoma, on one of our trips. But we sang at several churches and different things, and I enjoyed singing with the quartet at that time. Also went out for football and played. I didn't go out my freshman year, but I did go out sophomore, junior, and senior year, and I was on the first team all 3 years. I played in position. I got nicknamed Shoestring Dyer, and what they meant by it, when I tackled, I got them around the ankle and they came down, and they called me Shoestring Dyer. But anyway, I enjoyed football, and our senior year, we were regional champs. But we had two fellows on my side of the line that were brothers, and one of them weighed 201 and the other one weighed 203 pounds. And I only weighed 135 pounds at the time. And they'd always say, Dyer, have you got somebody that's giving you problems over there on the opponent from you? And if I said so-and-so, that certain fella, man, they took care of him. They got him out of the play immediately whenever the ball moved. Why, they helped me out, and I was able to get the ball carrier. If he came my way, I was able to get him tackled down. But I really enjoyed it. Also went out for basketball. I played fairly well, but I was not on the first team. I was on the second team, but did get to play quite a bit, and also went out for track. I enjoyed sports, and in track, I was a high jumper, and I jumped my height at that time, but I didn't do the jumping of the bar, scissor jump. I did a roll over. I'd go up and throw my body over and land flat, win second place, I think, in one of the tournaments by doing that. And at first they was going to eliminate me for not jumping like everybody else was jumping. And then they finally granted me the right to do that. And after that, several of them began to do the roll type going over the bar.
Now this was just regular jumping. This wasn't pole vaulting, right?
No, I was not a pole vaulter. I did some, but I wasn't in the competition. But the other thing I did was I ran a quarter mile, and mostly I ran that with a mile relay. There was 4 of us, and we would, each one of us, just run a quarter of a mile. You can run a quarter of a mile, just give it all you got. But if you're a half-mile runner, you have to pace yourself because you can't last full speed of half a mile or a mile. You got to pace yourself. But I won my. I was anchor man. That was the last one that run his quarter of a mile, and we went to the state on that. We didn't come in first, but we come in second in the state. But I never will forget, we had run a quarter of a mile or run a relay the day before, an elimination for the finals, and then the next day had to run the thing again. I probably was 100 yards or so from the finish line, and I just felt like I'd used every bit of energy. I really struggled to get across the line. I never had such a feeling in my life of just being completely out of energy, and my body just hadn't recovered enough from the day before to try to finish that quarter of a mile. But I finally did, and come in second. But
so you as a sprinter, you wasn't quite a long distance runner. You was more of a sprinter.
That's right. Yeah. Enjoyed that.
So, recapping, you was football, basketball, and track and field.
Yes,
there's not much that you didn't do.
I lettered in all three of those things. And when we were junior in high school, we had a play, and I was one of the ones that was in that play. And then we had a senior play last year, and I was one of the members of that play. I enjoyed that. I didn't have a whole lot to say, but some of my actions got some attention from folks. Got tickled at some of the things that I was supposed to say and do, and I enjoyed that. Oh, I had a psychology class in high school, and also I was taking what they call manual training. It was in the basement of the high school in a classroom. In that, you built something. I've got a foot locker, cedar built foot locker that I was working on, and I still have it in the other room in here.
Yeah, I remember that.
And the professor from the psychology class, which was the next period, came down, took me out of class and took me up into the classroom, and he says, we are going to have a little experiment here this morning when the class comes in. And so he demonstrated and showed me what he wanted me to do. And at the head of the classroom, there was another room, just a small room that had two doors that went in one end and you could come out the other end. And it was also kind of a little chemistry and stuff that it was equipped for to do different things. He says, now, you do just what I tell you after the class comes in here and gets settled down. You do what I tell you. Well, the class come in, so he had a board there that was about 5 foot long. He had pasted a red thing on my face, looked like a big blot of blood and fingers coming down on the face. He pasted that on my face before he left. He says, now, as soon as the class gets settled down, you put your foot on this board and your hand under the thing and raise it up and slap that thing down and make a big noise with it, like an explosion. And then you come stumbling out of this room right in front of the class, and you fall, and they just sort of see, and as you fall, and all this looked like blood coming down on my face. And lay there for a little bit. We'll see what the reaction is from the class. Well, I did that, and boy, I'm telling you, some of the kids screamed, and some of them, one of them run to the principal's office and told the principal that we'd had a big accident in our classroom, and the whole school got all shook up. And when I got up and showed them that I wasn't hurt, it wasn't anything, it was just a demonstration. Well, then the rest of the class had to get up and tell their reaction, how they felt, and so forth. And it was quite interesting. It made a big impression on the school of what kids will encounter in their life.
Well, just to be honest, this is the first time I've ever heard this story, so it's pretty good. I don't think you've ever told that story before, at least not that I remember. I'm sure everybody in our audience will get a kick out of that.
Well, it made the classroom more attentive to what was going on and what was being written in the book, and your reactions to certain things.
I bet.
So, and another time we come out of a class, and we was in the study hall, and we were supposed to be studying, and there was a professor of one of the classes that he was in charge of the study hall. His name was Interline, was his the professor's name. Well, Gordon Blumenshine, a good friend of mine, and we played football together and everything. And we were supposed to be studying, and we got to talking back and forth. He was sat behind me, and we got to kind of whispering back and forth to each other. We didn't know that the professor had walked into the back of the room and watched us for a minute. Man, he walked up, and he had the previous class had turned in a bunch of paper that they'd had to finish in class. He had a whole handful of folded paper, and he come up behind Gordon, and he hit him with them papers, and it sounded like a gun went off. And then he hit me about the next swing, hit me, and it's like scared both of us to death.
Were you trying to get your attention, or was he mad that y'all were whispering, or what?
Yeah, he wanted us to straighten up and get busy and
straighten up and fly right
instead of talking to one another there in class. So
I guess he got your attention then, didn't he?
He got our attention. He sure did.
Any more stories from the high school days? We're running a little bit short on times. Got anything else you want to say about your high school days?
Well, I was president of the junior class and the senior class, and as far as I know right now, I'm the only one left out of all of our class. Our class also, it would not have been, has not been a divorce in all their life out of all of our graduates, and there's only one or two boys or girls of our class that married. All of the rest of us married outside of the class at different ways, but and they've kept a record, and we had a great class, and a great teacher was Alice Parker, and she spent her whole life in the high school, and she always was very, very nice to me, and she belonged to our church, and she always greeted me as if I was one of the family or something, and well, they were very prominent people in town. The whole family had been, and a lot of them had become professors in schools, different places. She was an English teacher, and she was, there's one more thing. And walked into professor's class, and I believe this was Interline, is his, and he was kind of a strict fella anyway, and teacher says, take pencil and paper and mark from 1 to 10. We're going to have a little quiz. Well, I don't know where my books were, or where I didn't have a pencil and I didn't have a piece of paper, and I patted the student in front of me, Carrie Woods, and I says, could I borrow a piece of paper and a pencil? Well, she handed me a piece of paper, a page of paper, and she had her pocketbook on her desk, and she kept trying to find a pencil in it. She finally turned around and put the pocketbook on my desk behind her and says, there's a pencil in there, see if you can find it. Well, I started going through her thing. Teacher looked back there. He says, you've been teasing Carrie long enough. He says, you come on up here, and says, get everything you got. You're kicked out of class right now. You've been teasing her enough. And she spoke up and says, he wasn't teasing me. He said, I don't care, get him out of here. I got sent out of class, and I stayed out 3 days out of class before he let me back into class. But he didn't change his mind from his first remarks.
he wasn't going to let you off that easy, even if you didn't do it.
I might have had a little, had been teasing her sometimes in the past, and he might have remembered some of that.
I never knew that. I never knew you were such a troublemaker in high school, Pop. Well,
you got to do something.
I guess so. Well, we got to bring this segment to a close. So, Just want to say thank you all for watching this, and keep watching, please. Thank you. Thanks for watching our second episode in the series Thoughts and History from a Centenarian with Dale Dyer. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll keep coming back to watch upcoming episodes as well. If you did enjoy it, please give us a big thumbs up, and if you'd like to catch new episodes, and I promise not to take as long to get new videos put together and uploaded as I was last time, consider subscribing to our channel and clicking the bell icon below to be notified when new videos are published. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day everyone, and please stay safe and healthy out there.